They thought I was just the sweet old woman with lemon soap and a quiet smile. They never asked what I saw when no one was looking, or what I knew. My daughter married a man with ambition in his eyes and greed on his breath. Good thing they never guessed the truth. I'm not helpless, and I'm worth $7 million. I hadn't planned on flying anywhere this year. I was content with my porch and my marigolds, with my quiet routines and the hum of my neighbor's wind chimes through the screen door. But when my daughter Erin called and said she was getting married, to Jason, someone I'd never met, I found myself nodding before she'd even finished the sentence. "I really want you to meet him, Mom," she said. "Maybe come stay a couple of weeks after the honeymoon." Just until we get the kitchen finished, her voice was syrupy, hopeful, and I wanted to believe it was about seeing me. Not the kitchen. So I said yes. I booked a flight to Sacramento, packed my bag with more cardigans than I needed, and brought the lemon soap Erin liked. She used to steal bars of it when she came to visit. I even packed the blue enamel pie dish, the one Paul and I bought in Vermont 50 years ago. I thought maybe I'd bake. Maybe I'd be useful. When Jason opened the door, he was barefoot and holding a glass of something green. He smiled wide, too wide, the kind of smile people wear when they want to sell you something. "Mrs. Marks," he said, then laughed. "Or do I call you Mom now?" I gave him my hand instead of an answer. His palm was damp. I pretended not to notice. Their house was new, sleek, the kind of place that photographs well but feels like a hotel lobby. Stainless steel appliances, white walls, succulents arranged like set pieces. Erin floated down the hallway, barefoot too, wrapped in a robe I didn't recognize. "Mom, you're here!" She hugged me like I might disappear if she didn't squeeze tight enough. Then she pulled back, eyes gleaming. "Isn't it gorgeous?" Jason picked most of it. He has such great taste. He certainly thought so. At dinner he talked about the market, real estate, crypto, something called emerging trust optimization, that sounded like a magic trick with paperwork. He asked how long I'd lived in my house, what neighborhood, how many bedrooms. "Sounds like prime property," he said, swirling his wine. Erin didn't blink. I slept in their guest room. White sheets, white walls, a candle that smelled like grapefruit and soap. I unpacked quietly. Left the pie dish on the counter, just in case. In the morning, Jason was already on his laptop at the kitchen island, Erin making smoothies. "You know," she said between sips, "we were thinking, maybe you could stay a bit longer? Just until the backsplash gets installed. Jason says it'll only be a week or two, and it would really help." She smiled. That same smile she used when she was 16 and wanted to borrow the car. I said I'd think about it. The days blended. Jason was always around, always talking, to bankers, to someone about renovations, to me. He liked to tell me about asset leveraging and how wealth is about flow, not storage. I'd nod and sip my tea, biting back the urge to ask if he even had a job. Erin was busy reorganizing shelves, testing paint samples, ordering meal kits she never cooked. She seemed happy, if a little wired. One afternoon, I caught Jason in the garage, standing next to my suitcase. It wasn't open, but he was looking at it the way someone looks at a locked cabinet. When he saw me, he smiled. "Just trying to find the measuring tape," he said. "You packed light." I didn't respond. I went back inside and made lemon bars from scratch. When Erin came home, she kissed my cheek and said, "You spoil us." I didn't say that spoiling someone usually means they notice. The kitchen somehow kept getting delayed. "Permits," Jason said. "Contractors backed up." Erin shrugged. "We're just so lucky you're here." I started walking in the mornings, just to feel my own pace. Sacramento was hotter than I liked, but it helped to move. One evening, after dinner, Jason poured himself a third glass of wine and leaned across the table. "You ever think of downsizing, Marilyn?" he asked. "That place of yours, maintaining a whole house at your age, must be exhausting." Erin laughed. "Jason!" But not like it was a joke. More like she was embarrassed he said it out loud. I smiled. That polite grandmotherly smile I'd perfected over 72 years. It's only exhausting when people overstay their welcome, I said. He blinked. Aaron changed the subject. That night I sat on the guest bed, holding a pillow that smelled like detergent and something faintly plastic. I stared at the ceiling and tried to remember the last time Aaron asked me how I was sleeping, or if my knee still gave me trouble. I couldn't. I wasn't angry. Not yet. But something inside me shifted, like a chair leg cracking under slow pressure. You don't fall right away, but you know it's coming. The morning after that dinner, I got up earlier than usual. The house was quiet. Too quiet, like it had been vacuum sealed overnight. Jason's espresso machine hissed in the distance, but he wasn't there. I made myself a cup of weak tea and sat by the window, letting the California sun bleed through the slats of the blinds. I thought about what he said the night before. Downsizing, at my age. What Jason didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I could buy his precious kitchen 3 times over and still have enough left for 10 lifetimes. $7 million doesn't make you rich in movies, but in real life, in retirement, it makes you invisible in all the right ways. Paul and I had invested in a friend's software startup back in the late 90s. I remember writing that check like it was yesterday. I told him he was crazy. We were school teachers, for God's sake. But Paul believed in the guy, and the guy believed in something called security management for distributed servers. Sounded like nonsense. 20 years later, it sold for $400 million, and our shares turned into a blessing that felt almost sinful. After Paul died, I left the money where it was. Quiet, managed by a firm in Seattle, divided between index funds and something called municipal bonds. I never touched the principal. I lived off my pension and the leftover insurance money. I didn't tell the kids. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I knew them. Aaron had always lived one crisis away from catastrophe. Credit cards, student loans, a lease she couldn't afford, and now, Jason, with his shoes that cost more than my entire wardrobe, and that smirk like he was always 2 moves ahead in a game no one else knew they were playing. That morning, I pulled out my tablet and checked my accounts. Not for any reason, just reassurance. Everything was intact. $7.2 million, to be exact. Divided across 5 portfolios and a charitable trust under the name M.E. Paulson that I used for anonymous donations. I felt a strange comfort in the numbers. They didn't lie. They didn't ask for anything. They just sat there, quiet and clean, like snow that hadn't been walked on. Later that day, Jason offered to take me to lunch. Aaron was off running errands, and I could feel the setup before he even said it. We went to some overpriced place downtown where the waiters wore suspenders and the menus had no dollar signs. Jason ordered a kale Caesar with grilled salmon and talked about inflation like he had invented it. "You ever think about getting help managing your affairs?" he asked casually, between bites. "I mean, no offense, Marilyn, but at your age, you don't want things to get messy." I looked at him over my turkey sandwich, which was cold and soggy. "My affairs," I said, "are well managed." He laughed, that shallow little chuckle people use when they're trying not to look annoyed. "Of course. I just meant, if you ever needed help, Aaron and I are here. You know, to support you." I nodded. "And I'm here to visit, not be reorganized." That shut him up for about 2 bites. Then he pivoted. "Your house, it's in a trust, right? Or do you own it outright?" That's when I knew. This wasn't about support. It wasn't even about Aaron. It was about the property, the assets, me as a stepping stone. I smiled. "I own it. Free and clear. Since 1978. He raised his eyebrows, like I'd just confessed to burying gold bars under the floorboards. "Wow, that's impressive. You know, we've been thinking about investment properties. Airbnb, short-term rentals, that kind of thing. I changed the subject. Asked him if he wanted dessert. He didn't. Back at the house, I went to my room and locked the door. I pulled out the slim folder I kept in the lining of my suitcase. Copies of bank statements, legal documents, my trust outline. I added a sticky note. Watch Jason. That night, Erin came into my room while I was folding laundry. Jason said you were quiet at lunch, she said, flopping onto the bed like she was 17 again. Everything okay? I looked at her. Really looked. She seemed tired. Not the kind of tired from a busy day, but the tired that comes from living with someone who spins dreams out of debt. Everything's fine, I said. I just don't think he needs to worry about my money. She sat up. What money? I smiled. Exactly, she laughed, but it didn't sound natural. He's just trying to be helpful. He's got a lot of ideas. I bet he does, I said. I didn't tell her about the tablet notification that came in while we were at lunch, that someone had attempted to log in from an unrecognized device. I changed my passwords before the entree arrived. I didn't tell her that I called my advisor in Seattle that night, asked about placing everything under a tighter lock, an irrevocable trust, with layers Jason wouldn't even know existed. And I sure didn't tell her about the burner phone I bought the next morning, just in case I needed to make calls that didn't appear on the shared Wi-Fi. Sometimes being underestimated is the best disguise you can wear. Erin started picking fights with me over nothing. I folded a towel the wrong way. I loaded the dishwasher backwards. I left the porch light on, which somehow attracted bugs and ran up the bill. Jason didn't say much during these little skirmishes, but I saw the way his eyes lingered, half interested, half amused, like he was watching a show he'd seen before but didn't mind revisiting. It was around that time I stopped sleeping well. Not out of fear exactly, but a tension had crept into the walls of that house, and I could feel it every time I opened a drawer or boiled water for tea. I'd wake up before dawn, slip out onto the small patio, and just sit with the stillness, trying to remember what it felt like to be in a space that belonged to me. One morning, I noticed Jason in the driveway, talking to two men I didn't recognize. They had matching polos with a company logo I couldn't read from the window. Jason pointed at the house, at the roofline, at the hedges. He gestured like he was walking them through a property he didn't own. I stayed back, watched from the shadows of the blinds, then wrote down the time and a description of the truck, just in case. Later that afternoon, I asked Erin casually if someone was coming to look at the house. She blinked like I'd spoken a different language. What? Number? Why? No reason. Just thought I saw some folks out front earlier. She shrugged. Probably landscapers. Jason's trying to get a quote. I nodded, said nothing. That night, I checked the outdoor camera feed on my tablet. I'd set it up myself a week earlier. Just one small device tucked in a flower pot. No one knew it was there. The truck wasn't a landscaping company. It was a property management firm. The next few days, Jason turned unusually warm. He brought me coffee in the mornings. Wrong kind. Always sweetened, but still. He asked if I needed help with anything, if I'd thought about setting up a legacy binder, whatever that meant. I played along, smiled like the kindly fool he wanted me to be. Then came the day he brought it up directly. I was thinking, he said, sitting on the patio with a beer. Just brainstorming for down the line. Have you considered setting up a power of attorney? Something formal. In case anything ever happens, I tilted my head. Like what? He chuckled. I don't know. Life, I guess. Erin and I could help manage stuff if anything came up. I sipped my iced tea, let the silence stretch. Then I said, I've got it covered. He smiled too quickly, nodded like he'd expected that answer, but the edges of his mouth twitched just enough to show it irritated him. Erin confronted me later that night. Her arms were crossed before I even turned to face her. Jason said you got snippy about the POA thing. I didn't get snippy, I said. I answered. She exhaled hard, like a balloon deflating. You're being weird, Mom. You've been acting paranoid since you got here. Am I? I kept my voice even. Or am I just paying attention? She rolled her eyes. This is why we never ask you for help. You read into everything. Jason's trying to include you, and you treat him like some gold digger. I raised my eyebrows. Didn't say he was. But interesting that you went there. She flinched. For a moment the mask slipped. Then she turned and walked out, slamming the door just hard enough to make her point. I sat back on the bed and pulled my notebook from under the pillow. I added another date, another note. I'd started tracking things, comments, behaviors, inconsistencies, not because I needed proof for myself, but because I was starting to think I might need it for someone else. 2 nights later, I found Erin in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. She barely looked up. By the way, she said, Jason said you had a package come today. He left it on your bed. I froze. I hadn't ordered anything. I went to the room. The envelope was sealed, thick. My name written in Jason's handwriting. Inside, copies of legal documents. Templates, really. Power of attorney, financial disclosure forms, even a pre-drafted quitclaim deed. I stared at them for a long minute. Then I picked up my phone and called the lawyer who'd handled Paul's estate. I told her we needed to meet. Soon. I can come to you, she said. No, I said, quieter than I intended. I think it's time I got out of the house for a bit. As I packed my bag for the next day, I slipped the envelope into a folder, along with everything else I'd been collecting. I didn't know yet where this road was going, but I knew one thing for certain. If I stayed any longer, I might lose more than my patience. I left the house just after 7 the next morning, before the patio blinds rolled up and Jason started prowling the kitchen in his robe. Erin was still asleep, or pretending to be. I didn't leave a note. I didn't take the time to make the bed. I just slipped my folder into my bag, locked the guest room behind me, and walked down the street to the coffee shop on the corner where no one knew my name. I ordered something hot, too sweet, and waited for the lawyer. Her name was Angela Kirsch, mid-40s, sharp in a navy suit, no-nonsense eyes. She greeted me like an equal, not a relic. I like that. We sat in a corner booth while I laid it all out. The questions, the comments, the documents, the tracking on my tablet, the odd behavior, Jason's sudden interest in my affairs, my daughter's silence. Angela took notes with a quiet efficiency that reminded me of the school secretaries I used to work with, women who'd seen everything and flinched at nothing. Do you have a current will? She asked. I do. Everything goes to my children. Equally, Angela nodded. Then we revise. We add protections. A clause excluding any distribution to parties acting in bad faith. We transfer your home into an irrevocable trust. We layer the structure. No one touches anything unless you say so, in writing, twice. I stared at her. You've done this before. She smiled without warmth. More times than I'd like. By noon, the paperwork was in motion. She'd file the trust documentation, notify the financial institution in Seattle, place a legal flag on any power of attorney changes. She would also begin a background investigation, Jason's employment history, litigation, asset records. I didn't ask how she'd get it. I didn't need to. When I returned to the house, it was quiet. Too quiet. Jason was at the dining table on his laptop. He looked up like I was late to a meeting. Busy morning? He asked. The corners of his mouth curled just enough to count as a smirk. I gave him the same smile I used on high school principals who tried to intimidate me after budget meetings. I took a walk, I said. Clears the head. That evening, I baked an apple crisp and left it on the counter without a word. Erin was in the living room scrolling on her phone, feet tucked under her like she still lived in her childhood bedroom. She didn't speak. Jason didn't either. Later, I checked the guest room. My suitcase had been unzipped. I didn't say anything. I moved the folder to my purse, zipped it, and slept with it under my pillow. The next day, I called a private investigator, retired cop out of Roseville, recommended by Angela. I didn't give him much, just Jason's full name, approximate date of birth, and what I wanted to know. If there's something there, I told him, I want it in writing. He said he'd start that afternoon. Meanwhile, Jason's charm offensive shifted into overdrive. He started doing things for me, pulling weeds from the patio garden, offering to refill prescriptions I didn't need, asking what brand of vitamins I liked. At dinner, he brought up aging in place like it was some kind of trendy choice. You know, he said, we could help you update your home. Make it more accessible. Wider doorways, smart tech, all those stairs, might be risky. Erin, to her credit, looked vaguely uncomfortable. Jason, she murmured, maybe not now. No, I said, looking him dead in the eye. Now is fine. I think Jason should say whatever's on his mind. It's important to be transparent in a family. He hesitated, just for a beat, then shrugged. I just think long-term planning is smart, he said. You've got a lot of equity tied up in that house. Sitting on assets isn't always the best strategy. I set down my fork. Jason, I know exactly where I'm sitting. He smiled again, like I'd said something quaint. That night, I emailed Angela the notes from dinner, including verbatim quotes. She replied with one sentence. Keep documenting. I've seen enough to justify the next step. The next step came sooner than I thought. The investigator called. His voice was calm, methodical. You were right to be cautious, he said. Jason had several LLCs registered in Nevada and Delaware. Standard, but one of them had been linked to a civil suit for elder financial exploitation 3 years ago. It had been settled quietly. The plaintiff had been a woman in her 70s. No criminal charges, but enough red flags to cover a parade. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I wrote it down. Date, time, case number. Then I walked to the kitchen, made myself a cup of chamomile tea, and carried it to the patio. The stars were out, faint but present. The kind of quiet that hums around you like a warning. Jason walked out 5 minutes later, beer in hand. You know, he said casually, Erin and I were thinking of hosting Thanksgiving this year. Would be nice to have the family all together. Maybe we could go over some documents then. Clean things up. I sipped my tea. Sounds like a plan, I said. I went to bed that night knowing exactly what I had to do next. And this time, I wouldn't just be watching. I'd be moving. Jason didn't come home the next evening. Erin claimed he was meeting with a client, something about commercial real estate near Folsom. But when I passed his laptop in the kitchen and saw the open tabs, they weren't listings. They were estate planning templates and a Google search for fastest way to challenge a trust. The cursor blinked on a legal blog titled, Removing a Trustee for Incapacity. I took a screenshot with my phone and sent it to Angela. She replied within seconds. This confirms intention. We escalate now. I didn't go to bed that night. I sat in the guest room and wrote a letter. Not to Erin, not to Jason, to myself. To the version of me who might, if she let this go on, be erased completely. I listed everything I'd seen, everything I'd felt, and everything I was about to do. Then I folded the letter and slipped it into my suitcase. I'd read it again when I got where I was going. The next morning, I filed an official affidavit through Angela's office, alleging coercion, manipulation, attempted financial interference. She forwarded it to the Sacramento County Sheriff's Department, along with copies of Jason's settlement records. Within 24 hours, he received a notice of investigation and a temporary cease and desist order regarding any financial involvement with me. He read it in the driveway. Erin was still inside, cooking pasta. I watched him through the blinds as his jaw tensed, his hands crumpling the envelope. He stormed into the house, didn't even take off his shoes. You called a lawyer? He snapped. A fucking investigator? I didn't answer. I was sitting on the couch, knitting. Calm, steady. yarn sliding between my fingers like water. Aaron ran in behind him. "What is going on?" "Jason, what?" "She's setting us up," he barked. "This is elder abuse in reverse." "I should have known." "You should have," I said, not looking up. "But not for the reasons you think." Aaron turned to me, eyes wide with hurt. "Why would you do this, Mom? Why would you go behind our backs?" "Our?" I asked. "Since when did you and I become opposite teams?" Jason looked like he wanted to break something. Instead, he grabbed his keys and left, door slamming hard enough to rattle the pictures on the hallway wall. Aaron just stood there, silent, pale. I stood up, folded the knitting into my bag, and faced her. "You didn't stop him," I said, "even when you saw it. You let it happen because it was easier to ignore." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know what to believe." "You knew," I said. "You just didn't want to lose the version of your life he sold you." I walked to the guest room and zipped my suitcase. I hadn't unpacked much, just my toiletries and one cardigan. I left the pie dish on the counter, clean and unused. Angela had already arranged a driver to pick me up and take me to the airport. Not the Sacramento airport, no. Too easy. We were headed south, to a private flight booked through a connection she had in Flagstaff. I'd bought the house in Arizona the week prior. Small, single-level, desert light pouring through big windows. No stairs. No one else's name on the deed. As the driver pulled away, Erin stood in the doorway. She didn't wave. She didn't ask me to stay. She didn't cry. 2 days later, an article ran in a Sacramento watchdog blog. The headline read, "Predatory son-in-law targets elderly widow for home and inheritance." My name wasn't used, but the facts were there. Jason's previous suit, the LLCS, the manipulation. Aaron was listed only as an unaware relative. Angela released the article with my blessing. I wanted other women to know, to recognize the signs, to understand that being polite doesn't keep you safe, but telling the truth might. I got a text from Aaron a week later. "You humiliated us. I don't know if I can ever forgive you." I didn't respond. I put the phone in a drawer and went outside to watch the sunset. The light in Arizona is different. Less forgiving, more honest. You can see for miles. That night, I opened my notebook and wrote one more note. Never ignore your instincts, even when they wear your daughter's voice. The days in Arizona unfolded slowly. Like pages in a book no one rushed to finish, I rented a modest house outside Sedona. Flat-roofed, terracotta-colored, with creaky ceiling fans and tile floors that cooled your feet even in August. Mornings started with chamomile and the sound of quail rustling in the bushes. Evenings ended with silence so wide you could hear yourself think in it. It wasn't luxury, but it was mine. I didn't tell anyone where I went, not even my son in Portland. Angela knew, of course. She'd helped close the deal and transferred the deed into the trust's name. Everything was airtight now. Jason couldn't touch $1. Aaron wouldn't inherit a thing unless I changed my mind. And I wouldn't. I signed up for a senior watercolor class at the local community center. They gave me a student ID that made me laugh. Bad lighting. The kind that made your eyes look both too tired and too surprised. But the people were kind. There was a woman named Dee who had the same tight curls I used to perm in the 70s, and a retired librarian named Florence who baked lemon bars every week without fail. No one asked me where I came from. No one looked at me like a puzzle to solve. It was a relief I hadn't known I needed. I got a letter in the mail a few weeks in. Real paper, no return address. But the handwriting was precise and familiar. It was from one of Jason's previous victims. I'd never met her, but she'd read the article. "Thank you," it said. "You saved me from making a mistake I'd already convinced myself wasn't a mistake. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was overreacting, but you made me realize I wasn't." I folded the letter neatly, placed it in the back of my notebook behind all the dates and red flags I'd once scribbled like lifelines. That night, I slept with the windows open. The desert air was dry and sharp, and it made my lungs ache in the most honest way. Every now and then, I'd think of Erin. I'd remember her as a little girl, tugging at my skirt in the grocery store, asking if we could buy the cereal with the cartoon owl on it. I'd remember the way she cried after her first breakup, her head buried in my lap like the world had ended. I didn't hate her. That would have been easier. I just didn't trust her. And trust, once cracked, doesn't glue back together with apologies. It needs time, pressure, a kind of tectonic shift neither of us was willing to make. I kept one photo of her, the two of us at the lake house when she was 10. I didn't display it. I kept it in a box, tucked under the bed, next to the last quilt Paul ever touched. One evening, as the sky bled orange across the hills, I got a call from an unknown number. I let it ring again. Then silence. I didn't call back. I made tea, sat on the porch, and watched the horizon disappear into itself. A coyote barked somewhere in the distance. The stars came out without fanfare, and for the first time in a long, long time, I didn't feel like someone's mother. I felt like myself. And thank God, I thought, as I sipped my tea. Thank God no one ever found out about the 7 million, or else they'd have buried me under my own front porch with a smile and a shovel, all in the name of taking care of me.